Hey guys, and welcome back to the darkroom. Today we're going to be doing something a little different. Normally in the darkroom we're developing 35mm film and 120 format film. And when we're doing that, we're usually doing it in our developing tanks, like our Patterson tanks. Today though, the different thing we're going to be doing is actually developing 4x5 sheet film. And 4x5 sheet film basically ends up in holders like this. You load the film into these holders and then you actually shoot in a 4x5 camera. The camera I'm using is actually a Crown Graphic press camera that I'm borrowing from a friend, and you're shooting your 4x5 sheets. So when you go to develop them, there is a company that makes a device that you can use in a normal Patterson tank to develop 4x5 sheets, but I happen to have this setup right here for developing, and this is basically the BTZS tube setup. It comes with a nice instruction sheet, but what it allows me to do is develop 6 sheets of 4x5 film at once and do it mostly light tight. So there's a couple portions of this where we're going to have to go black and cut the lights to keep from fogging the film, but for the most part we're going to be able to do a lot of this in the light. So right now I have all 6 rolls of film in the tubes here, and these tubes are sealed. There's a cap portion and then there's the lower portion. So this first part is going to have to be done in the dark. So what I'm going to do is take these tubes, take the caps that are currently on these tubes off, and then slide it this way, and then I'm going to take these caps up here and take those caps and put them onto the tube. So in these caps is my developer, and by doing this we can have all these new tubes sit upright so the developer is in the tube but it's not touching the film yet. And then once I have all the tubes set up and light tight, we can turn the lights back on, and at that point we're going to pick them up and then shake them to start the developing process, then drop them back down into this, which is kind of our water tray here, and then basically roll the tubes to act as the agitation for the film. So what I'm going to do right now is cut the lights, and when we come back we'll be ready to, like I said, pick up those tubes and shake them and get the whole process started. Alright, so we are back from the dark. Like I said, we have all the tubes now put upright in these holders. So now all those lower sections were taken off, and now all the lower sections that are on those tubes have our developer in there. So once we're ready, we can basically, like I said, we're going to pick these up, shake them, and that'll be the start of our development. So while we talk about the development, one thing we can do is talk about the film. What we're shooting with our 4x5 is Arista 200 ISO 4x5 sheet film. So 4x5 sheet film comes in basically just this little box here. This is common for almost all 4x5 sheets. So you just get this nice little box. Obviously I already tore the sticker off, and we got 25 sheets, and as I take them out I just take a number down so I have an idea of how many sheets I have, because you're doing this in the darkness, or in the darkness of a changing bag, so it's a lot easier to keep count if you just mark it on the outside of the box when you can look at it in the light. So that's the Arista. We've shot with Arista before, just never in 4x5 sheet film, so we'll see how the results go. I'm kind of curious, kind of using this cheaper, Arista film as a test bed. What we're really looking to do is shoot, some color negative film on the 4x5, do the development and see how that turns out and see what kind of results we can get. But first, cut your teeth with a nice black and white film, something that's easy to work with, something that's a pretty good price point. Enough about that though. So with the Arista, it's a 1-to-1 dilution, so 30 milliliters of distilled water and then 30 milliliters of developer. So 60 milliliters for each tube when we're developing here, and it's going to be 9 minutes. And during that 9 minutes, it's going to be a constant agitation, unlike with roll film where you're doing maybe 5 seconds of agitation every minute. This is going to be more or less constant agitation. So I think we're ready here. So I'm going to hit start on our timer. 9 minutes is going to start counting down, and we're going to give these a good rapid shake and then dump them in. So yeah, let's give it a go. Alright, so we're about halfway through, and it's definitely a little bit of a chore to keep all 6 of these spinning at once. But it's really nice because you're cutting your development time in half, or well, not in half, you're cutting it in sixths, basically, because in other processes you're maybe able to do 1 sheet at a time. I know the last time I was developing 4x5 sheets, I was going 1 sheet at a time, but I wasn't doing nearly as many. I think I had 4 sheets total, and we hadn't yet gotten this tube set up. So really, a lot of times in the darkroom, it's about saving time and batch processing, because your consistency stays a lot better when you do it as one big group instead of doing it, over multiple setups. You have a better chance for error, instead of here where we're mixing all our chemicals at the same time and then keeping our temperature the same, so we get really consistent results across all 6 of these rolls, or all 6 of these sheets. Alright, coming up on just over a minute left here. I'm actually going to get ready to cut the lights so we can take on the next part of this process, which will be putting it into our stop bath. So, bear with me here, and when the lights come back on, we will be fixing some of these shots here, and we can start seeing how they turned out. So, hold with me, and we'll see you after the little... Alright, so I'm still in a bit of subdued light here, just so we're not getting too crazy on this. But what I'm going to do is show you guys how we're going to pull out this last roll here, which is going to be tough because it is awfully dark. We'll pop on a little bit of light. So all we're going to do here is, when we have the tube, the film is actually sitting inside the tube still, and all you do is kind of give it a little twist to tighten up, and our film pops out just like that. And then into the fixer it goes. That simple. So now we are on to the fixing part of it. So we have our fixer laid out here. All of our developer we poured out to here. You can see that the developer took on quite a bit of a green tone. And now what we're doing is we have our film in the fixer, and we are just taking, and basically what it says is to rotate from the top to the bottom on our film. So we're just kind of taking and shuffling these like cards, more or less. And we're going to do that for a while in this subdued light until it's fixed. Usually it's about 6 minutes for a fixer normally. We're going to go a little longer on the sheet film because that's what was suggested. So we will go back to some subdued lighting, and we'll show you the results after we get done with that. So actually, if we talk about that, let's just give ourselves 12 minutes, and we'll come back to you guys after that 12 minutes, and we'll see what we have. Alright, so we are past the fixer now, and we are on to just kind of a final rinse. Something that I noticed, and it's really normal for a lot of films, and you saw it with the developer when we poured that out, and it was sitting in our waste receptacle here, is it had a real green tint to it. And a lot of different films seem to have different colors to them. I know before on this channel we've done T-Max films, and they have a very kind of magenta, like purplish look to them, and that's just kind of like the dye used to the developing, and it's a really good way to indicate, if the film has been cleared or not. So as we pour out the developer is very green. As we ran the fixer and the stop bath, you can see green through all stages of that. And now we're on to basically just a final rinse. And as you're going through, you can see that green color still on some parts of the film here. And you can see it actually in the water. I don't know if it picks up so much on camera, but to my eyes here, I can still see a green tint in the water just from clearing that dye off of the film. So what I'm doing right now is just kind of rotating the negatives through just the water just to help that dye clear off of there so we can have a nice clean film negative that we can work with. And then once we're done with this water bath, we'll just be hanging up and letting the film dry before we can scan it in. But like I said, first we need to make sure we fully clear off the film. But we're definitely getting there. And it's looking real good. We'll have to get a light behind here so you guys can see them and see how nice these really turn out. It's interesting, you know, going from working with a 35mm negative to a 120 negative, which is quite a bit larger, and then up to, you know, a 4x5. It really makes a big difference. It's just a real fun, sharp image to look at. I mean, it's pretty simple. You can look and see, like when we talk about size here, this is, you know, the canister the 35mm cartridge comes in. It's obviously even a little more narrow than this. I don't have any extra lying around right now. Shocking. So that's a 35mm canister. Then you take something like this, which is an empty spool of 120. I just have the paper rolled back onto it. So you can see that, you know, fairly close. One's a little bit wider, a little bit more flexibility with the 120. But if we take and look at that compared to the size of a 4x5 sheet, you can see that that 4x5 sheet sits quite a bit taller, and then the length on it, you get quite a bit more, which without any backlighting, it's very tough to see just how big one of these sheets are. But like I said, quite a bit bigger frame size than say a 35 or even a 120. A little more time consuming to shoot though. I mentioned that I was shooting with a Crown Graphic that I'm borrowing from a friend, and the process for shooting 4x5 sheet film is a little more time consuming and a little more delicate than, you know, a 35mm point and shoot. So I guess obviously the takeaway is that there's handoffs. You know, sometimes with a larger film format you trade off maneuverability, you trade off compact, easy to use, and what you gain for those things you lose is just image quality, image size, and just kind of a fidelity that you can only get with a larger film format and a nice lens. So, like I said, there's trade-offs. Obviously 35mm has its place. It's great for just point and shoot, for just nice take with you kind of photography. Obviously the 4x5 a little bulky. A lot of these shots you're composing them and then putting the film back in, so you require a tripod so you don't lose your frame. So, you know, it's definitely a different game, but it's nice because that setup time gives you real time to think and compose your shots and really make it count. So that's kind of the takeaway here. These are starting to clear up. Like I said, I think we're just going to finish up with our wash bath. And then we'll be able to hang these prints up. And really what we're going to do is scan these in on our flatbed scanner and get a much better look at how these turned out, kind of the clarity and just the size of the film and how that affects the image versus say a 35mm shot. So, thanks for watching this portion of it, you guys. The next part of this will be cutting to some scanned images of the film and me voicing over talking about the shots. And kind of like the last part of that, we'll talk about this. When I shoot on a 4x5, I like to take notes and just kind of keep notes of what each, you know, shot was. Because with like this, you're doing a lot less shots. I mean, you know, a 35mm roll, you're getting, you know, anywhere from 24 to 36 shots per roll. In the 2 weeks I've had this camera, I have done all of 8 shots. So it's something where I like to keep like to keep track of what I'm doing. And I also have a handy little note written here telling me how to know whether a slide is unexposed or exposed. And then obviously here I just have exposure settings that I used, and then just a note about the picture taken. So when I come back to a film back later on and I'm looking at it saying, okay, you know, number 9 is exposed here, but what did I shoot at that? Or what did I shoot with that film? So by taking notes, I can know that, you know what, with this number 9 shot, that was one of my buddies down at Blue Mountains. So it makes it a lot easier just to keep notes. And really, that's something that can spill over to, you know, all photography. I mean, like I said, with 35mm, you're taking a lot more shots. So it might be harder to count every single exposure, but in some cases it might be nice just to label film and say, hey, this is that roll of film from this day, or, you know, from this particular event. So keeping notes, very important with all film, even more important when you talk about 4x5. So, like I said, let's cut to some scanned images and some voiceover, and we can talk more about these shots and where they were taken and what the field notes look like. I'll make sure to add those to the photos as well. Alright, here we go. We got everything scanned in. One of the things I can kind of talk about when we're looking at the shutter speed and the f-stop here, with the shutter speed, you'll notice that a lot of the shutter speeds are actually pretty slow in terms of photography, anywhere from 1/100th to 1/25th of a second. The best way to describe this is there's something called light fall off when you're working with larger format film. And the best way to explain this is if you were in a dark room with a flashlight and you were close to the wall, you'd end up with a fairly bright circle that was actually kind of on the smaller side. And then as you stepped back and walked away, you'd actually get a larger circle of light, but the brightness of that circle would be lessened, kind of proportionally to how far away you were. The same thing applies with photography, in that the further away the lens is from the image or the film, you actually lose some of that light, and to compensate for that, we have to use a slower shutter speed to let more light into the camera. Really though, when we're doing these, we're using a tripod, so the slower shutter speed does not affect really the whole process very much. As far as the quality of the camera, the images are incredibly sharp from the 4x5 camera, and it kind of shows on these photos here. We're doing kind of an overall past the photo and then just kind of a zoomed in section on some of the more detailed parts of that photo, so you can really see how well the lens resolves in these shots. But overall, had a lot of fun with this camera. Still have a lot of shots left to process, so look forward to seeing more from this in the future. But for now, thanks for watching, guys.